LiberalViewer presents. LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the June 18th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's 11 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis for you, all of you tonight. The show's a little bit later than usual. There's something of a heat wave here in Sacramento. You can hear this is kind of the peak of it today. I took on my phone, and unfortunately my air conditioner is not working so well, so even though it is about midnight here in Sacramento, it's still about 80, 81 degrees inside my house. It's like 90 degrees outside the house, and so this will be the sweaty edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. The big topic I'm covering is Trump under investigation? Is he a suspect? Is he being investigated for obstruction of justice? I put a poll up. You can click on the little eye here and answer the poll if you think that he is or is about to be under investigation for obstruction of justice based on this Washington Post story this last week. Last week, the poll results, I think over 90% of you thought that you should believe James Comey over Donald Trump, and James Comey is kind of the reason that I believe Trump is under investigation for obstruction of justice, and I will get to that. By the way, I put a link down to the list of the clips, all 11 clips that you can look at if you want to understand my cryptic notes, or try to understand my cryptic notes, I should say. The clips come from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. Plus, I have an opening couple minutes from Bill Maher's monologue on the big topic of Trump being under investigation. And how do we know? Because he confirmed it himself, and that's going to come up again and again, especially with Trump's lawyer, Jay Sekulow. Most of the clips will be from him. There'll be some news clips, and then there'll be a bonus Representative Adam Schiff, Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, trying to put it all together for us at the end. But let's start with Bill Maher making fun of Donald Trump several different ways for how he got himself into this big mess in this clip.
Donald Trump, have you been following what this guy's up to? For months, he has been absolutely obsessed with harassing every single law enforcement official in the federal government to tell everybody I'm not under personal investigation. Not personal investigation. Tell everybody. Well, now he's under personal investigation. That's the big story that happened this week. The charge is obstruction of justice, and it was the typical pattern we have seen with the news. The Washington Post, acting on leaks, broke this story around 5 p.m. A few days ago. Fox News spent all night trying to debunk it, and then Trump himself confirms it during his 4 a.m. poop tweet. Then the other news outlets were all trying to confirm this, but why? At 3:55 a.m., Trump tweeted, "Now they go for obstruction of justice. Nice." This is like Watergate if Deep Throat was Nixon. Right? Usually these federal investigations go slowly. Not this one. Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller has already hired 13 lawyers with plans to hire a lot more. He is so far up Trump's ass, he had to ask Putin to scoot over. Mueller and his team have already found a clue that Trump fired Comey to stop the Russia investigation. It's the time Trump went on TV and said, "I fired Comey to stop this Russia investigation." With the clue. Boy, he's a master criminal, this Trump.
And I definitely like that last joke about Trump giving the big clue himself in an NBC interview to Lester Holt. That will come up, you'll see, in some of the questions to Trump's lawyer, Jay Sekulow, that I'll be showing in a few minutes. And I also like the way Bill Maher started off by pointing out how Trump built up his problem so much that wasn't really talked about on any of the real news shows, that Trump built up the problem so much by saying over and over again, I'm not under investigation. 3 times Comey said I wasn't under investigation, and he built that up as such a big thing. Under investigation doesn't mean guilty. It just means that there is enough information to start an investigation, and as Bill Maher pointed out, he gave the evidence himself. He told Lester Holt he was thinking of the Russia investigation when he fired Comey. He also has confirmed the investigation, and that's going to be a big point of contention where his lawyer will say, no, he didn't confirm the investigation, even though he put out a tweet that started off, I am under investigation. So that is actually going to be part of this news report from NBC's Meet the Press. I think they did the best job of summarizing all the developments on this issue, especially with the Washington Post story. And there was actually some coverage of the shooting of members of Congress, and that you'll see. I edited out the footage of the actual shooting from this news clip just because I'm worried about YouTube censorship, so I guess I engaged in self-censorship. But other than that, this is the full report, and actually I'll show a Face the Nation clip a little later where NBC's Meet the Press was not the only program that drew this comparison between the call for unity after the shooting, but then the, big vicious attacks from Trump on the investigation and on, witch hunt, and I will discuss this NBC News report with you after we watch it together over here.
In office for less than 5 months, and it's fair to say his presidency is now in some peril. News organizations led by the Washington Post reported this week that Mr. Trump is under investigation for possible obstruction of justice. The president struck back on Twitter, seeming to acknowledge that that fact was true. But then a source close to his outside counsel insisted that when President Trump said, I am being investigated for firing the FBI director, that was not an acknowledgement that he was being investigated for firing the FBI director. It was another bizarre Twitter turn, as both the White House and Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team have been lawyering up, preparing for what appears to be a long battle with potentially historic implications. Throw in word that Mueller is also looking into the president's son-in-law's business dealings and potential interactions with Russians, and you have a presidency increasingly enveloped in crisis, and all this on a week punctuated by that frightening attack on Republican lawmakers that exposed how thin the line can be between talk and violence.
Let us always remember that our job is to serve and represent the whole American people. We do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country.
But Mr. Trump undercut his calls for unity, lashing out at his own Justice Department and at Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who is now investigating the president for possible obstruction of justice. On Thursday, Mr. Trump called the investigation the single greatest witch hunt in American political history, led by some very bad and conflicted people.
Do you believe that you are under investigation now?
On Friday, he doubled down. I am being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. Witch hunt. It's an apparent reference to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who is not leading the investigation, and it contradicts what Mr. Trump himself told NBC's Lester Holt about why he fired James Comey.
Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
On Friday, the president added a new powerhouse lawyer, John Dowd, to his legal defense team, after the Washington Post reported that Mueller is also investigating Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his business dealings. An attorney for Kushner tells NBC News, we do not know what this report refers to. It would be standard practice for the special counsel to examine financial records to look for anything related to Russia. Ironically, as a candidate, Trump warned that electing his opponent would produce endless investigations, the biggest scandal since Watergate, cover-ups, and an inability to govern.
Hillary is likely to be under investigation for many years, probably concluding in a criminal trial.
But now it's Mr. Trump facing a protracted federal investigation led by a special counsel who most members of the president's own party support.
I have a lot of confidence in Bob Mueller. I think it was a good choice.
Is Mueller's probe a witch hunt?
I don't view it that way.
It's not a witch hunt.
And joining me.
So that was the roundup of the developments from NBC News' Meet the Press. I thought it was the best summation, and I think in general Chuck Todd does a good job, although I know a lot of my live commenters disagree. I checked that out when I played this next clip of Chuck Todd. The next several clips are all of the president's lawyer, Jay Sekulow, who I've been aware of for many years because, you know, I've done volunteer work with the ACLU, and Jay Sekulow is the head of this group called the ACLJ, which was actually patterned as sort of like a doppelganger of the ACLU, supposedly from the right-wing Christian perspective. It's like to protect religious rights, and he was doesn't really believe that there are many establishment clause violations, meaning that the government endorsing religion is pretty much okay with Jay Sekulow, and school prayer is good with Jay Sekulow, and that's one of the places that they fought with the ACLU, although religious freedom cases, sometimes they could be on the same side as the ACLU. But I never found him to be particularly honest in his arguments, or in... I don't have a lot of respect for his integrity as a lawyer, I have to say, from over the years, and so I'm going to criticize these many clips of him, and also critique the way the different journalists try to get him to answer pretty much the same question, which is, how can you say the president is not under investigation when he tweeted something out starting off, "I am under investigation"? And the first of those clips from NBC's Chuck Todd talking to Jay Sekulow is here, and I will discuss with you after we watch it together.
Let me begin with getting some clarification here. The president tweeted earlier this week, "I am being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. Witch hunt." So let me start with this. When did the president become aware that he was officially under investigation by the special counsel?
The president is not under investigation by the special counsel. The tweet from the president was in response to the 5 anonymous sources that were purportedly leaking information to the Washington Post about a potential investigation of the president. But the president, as James Comey said in his testimony, and as we know as of today, the president has not been and is not under investigation.
Well, I go back to the tweet. Then why did he say he was? Yeah. I mean, was this he just mistweeted? Are we not to take him at his word?
No, the president's tweet was in response to the Washington Post story. So the Washington Post issued a story that had 5 anonymous sources, which they never identified what agencies those sources originated out of. The response from the president, using social media, was about that story. But let me be very clear here, as it has been since the beginning. Yeah. The president is not and has not been under investigation for obstruction.
Okay, then, and why is the president confused? Is he just is this just that he's thinks the media is correct here or not? I'm confused by this. No, why is he not taking your legal advice or other legal advice, saying, "Hey, don't, Mr. President, you're not under investigation, so why tweet this?" This is why there's confusion.
Chuck, I think you're reading more to the tweet than what's there. The president sent out that tweet directly in response to the Washington Post story with the 5 anonymous, unnamed sources from unnamed agencies. So that's why he put that in the tweet. So, look, the president has been, as you know, very effective in utilizing social media. But I want to be very clear here and very direct. The president has not been and is not under investigation. And that is, the tweet was in response to the Washington Post story with no named sources whatsoever. In fact, as you know, Chuck, no named agencies whatsoever.
Let me go to something else to that tweet.
So that was an okay job by Chuck Todd, even though I was just praising his news report. The way he tried to get Jay Sekulow to answer the question about whether the president's under investigation. He let him say he's not under investigation, but didn't really ask him how he knows, which you'll see a couple of the other questioners ask him. He did this follow-up that some of the other questioners also did. I'm not going to show duplication so much of this part, except when it gets to Fox News, there's this weird kind of Jedi mind trick thing that happens. But that'll be near that's clip number 8, and we're only on clip number 4. This is where Chuck Todd asks about the second half of the tweet, not the under investigation part, but he's being investigated by the person who recommended firing, but he's actually being investigated by Bob Mueller and not Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, who is the person who supposedly recommended that he fire James Comey, although there's this weird switcheroo that Jay Sekulow pulls where he talks about the memo from Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein coupled together with the cover page from the Attorney General Jeff Sessions that actually recommended the firing of James Comey, which Rod Rosenstein didn't actually do, and he testified. You'll see in the follow-up from Chuck Todd, he does a good job in this questioning because he mentions that Rod Rosenstein testified that he never recommended the firing of James Comey. And this is about 4 minutes. I think this is probably Chuck Todd's best 4 minutes from Meet the Press this morning here.
Something else of that tweet, he said, by the man who told me to fire the FBI director, I assume that is a reference to the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. The president himself said he was going to fire the FBI director regardless of whatever the Deputy Attorney General or the Attorney General said. So I'm confused there. Who made the recommendation to fire James Comey? Was it the president's decision, or was it the recommendation of the Deputy Attorney General?
Well, first of all, the president ultimately makes the decision. That's what he is as president of the United States. There's a collaborative and discussion, very thorough process. I'm holding in my hand the letter that was sent from the Attorney General of the United States with the memorandum from the Deputy Attorney General of the United States regarding the situation involving former FBI Director Comey. And in that recommendation is a recommendation for removal. Now, as you know, presidents have the ability to think about these situations not in a vacuum. There's a process. When he met with his Attorney General, when he met with his Deputy Attorney General and reviewed their recommendations of what they thought the appropriate course of action should be, both were convinced, with, as I say, a long and very persuasive document, that James Comey should be removed. But here is the irony, and Chuck, I think this is really important. If the leaks were correct about this investigation, again, those are leaks, they're not substantiated, and we have no knowledge of an investigation. But if those leaks were correct, here's what the legal theory of this case would have to be, and this would raise a serious constitutional issue right out of the beginning. You would have had the President of the United States reviewing a letter and recommendations from his department head, and that would be the Attorney General of the United States, as well as others. Sure, he had consultation with other people, and that's the nature of these issues. And he made a determination based on that consultation and based on a deliberative process to terminate the FBI director, as they recommended.
But Mr. Sekulow, that is not what the president said to Lester Holt. The president said to Lester Holt that he had already made the decision to fire James Comey. So I'm confused here. You just said he asked for this consultation, which, by the way, let me also say here, Mr. Rosenstein, in his prepared statement, in his testimony to Congress last month, said, my memorandum is not a statement of reasons to justify a for-cause termination. So I am confused by your rationale here.
Well, let me just say two things. Number one, the letter to the President of the United States from the Attorney General of the United States is, therefore, I must recommend that you remove Director James Comey and identify an experienced and qualified individual to lead the great men and women of the FBI. That's pretty unqualified. And attached to that is a memorandum from the former, not this case, the Deputy Attorney General's office, where he lays out the reason of his concern and recommendation of removal was because of the handling of the Hillary Clinton matter. But let's take a look at what you just said. Here's what you just said. The president made the decision before. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, there was all kinds of decisions being discussed. Right. But this crystallized that decision. But the fact of the matter is the president, under the Constitution, has the authority to make that decision. Now, he has these two memorandums from his Attorney General and his Deputy Attorney General. So here's the theory of this purported case from the Washington Post. I mean, just think about this for a minute. So the president of the United States takes action to remove the FBI director, and he has a recommendation from his Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General to take that action. He's now, according to the Washington Post, being investigated by the same department who told him to take that action. Right. That's not constitutional.
Well,
that's not the way the Constitution works.
The question is going to be, though.
So, I mean, that is actually not a very good constitutional argument from such a supposedly good constitutional lawyer. And as I should point out, I think Jay Sekulow has a good appearance on TV. I've watched him for many years on Fox News, where he appeared all the time, and he's argued many cases in the Supreme Court, so he's a skilled lawyer, and he's doing his best to put in his lawyerly spin. But there are a couple, like I said, there are some tricks where he's conflating things that should not be conflated. Like I said, the memo from Rosenstein that said the reasons that was critical of James Comey, that had a cover letter from Attorney General Jeff Sessions that said recommend fire James Comey, and of course Trump had already made up his mind. And the argument that Jay Sekulow was making, that because the president has the constitutional power to fire anyone in the executive, that means that it can't be illegal or it can't be wrongdoing or obstruction. But that's just not true, because I think you'll hear Adam Schiff make an argument at the end about just because you don't have a contract. A lot of people know about at-will employment. If you're an at-will employee, it means your boss can fire you at any time. You don't have a contract. You have, it's basically day to day. Anytime the boss can say sorry, you have to go. But that doesn't mean the boss can say sorry unless you give me sexual favors. You have to go, or because that's sexual harassment, that's against public policy, or for a discriminatory reason, for your religious beliefs, for because of your race. Your boss can't fire you for your race if you can prove it, which is kind of tough to do. But if you're an at-will employee, that doesn't mean that you can be fired for any reason. And the same is true in the argument that that the president has the power to fire anyone in the executive branch, but that doesn't mean that if he does it for a corrupt reason, it's not obstruction of justice. And by the way, I put a link down in the video description again, as usual, to the two main obstruction of justice statutes that I think apply, as well as a 2014 Congressional Research Service study of the case law of obstruction of justice, and especially the high bar to prove corrupt intent, because that it's a specific intent crime where you really have to prove that the action, not just that it was done and knowingly done, but that it was done with a corrupt intent, which is to do something wrong, at least, I guess. But some people say that Trump telling all the other people to leave the room before he told James Comey that he hoped he would lay off the Michael Flynn investigation, that's evidence of corrupt intent. But anyway, I want to move on to now the CNN State of the Union clips, where Jake Tapper, I'm going to give a couple clips of him talking to Jay Sekulow. First, I think he does a better job of pointing out the absurdity of Jay Sekulow's argument that the tweet that it starts off, I am under investigation, does not mean that the president is under investigation. And I didn't really say before, but his argument that he's just responding, it's 140 characters, so he doesn't have time to put in all the nuances. Well, if he put the word if I am under investigation, and if you look at the tweet, you'll see the word the appears 3 times. All 3 of those could be cut out and make room for the word if at the beginning of the tweet, which would have, if he really wasn't trying to say he was under investigation, he should have put the if there. And it's just another example of how Trump is the cause of all of his own problems. But here is his lawyer, Jay Sekulow, trying to wriggle out of the damning tweet of his client, President Donald Trump, under the questioning of Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union this morning. And it's going to start off with Jake Tapper showing the tweet, and you can see the 3 times the word "the" appears in the tweet. That's 9 characters. Could have been cut out to make space for like 3 characters, IF space at the beginning. Also, there's an I am at the beginning that could be I'm. But so there's a lot of space to save just to put an if at the beginning if he wanted to. Look at the tweet and then listen to how Jake Tapper tries to pin down Jay Sekulow on it here.
To Camp David for the first time ever this weekend, perhaps hoping a walk in the woods might clear his head. He certainly seemed frustrated this week, tweeting, quote, "I am being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. Witch hunt." I'm joined now by a member of President Trump's legal term, Jay Sekulow, the chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice. Jay, good to see you as always. Happy Father's Day.
Good to see you. Happy Father's Day to you, Jay.
Thank you so much. So, should we take that tweet from the president as confirmation that the president is under investigation?
Let me be clear, the president's not under investigation. As James Comey said in his testimony, that the president was not the target of investigation on 3 different occasions. The president is not a subject or target of an investigation. That tweet was in response to a Washington Post story that ran with 5 unnamed sources without identifying the agencies they represented, saying that the special counsel had broadened out his investigation to include the president. We've had no indication of that. The president was responding to that particular statement from the Washington Post, again, with 5 anonymous sources.
Right.
And again, without even identifying the agency. So, no, the president's not under investigation, has not been.
So the president said, "I am under investigation," even though he isn't under investigation?
That response on social media was in response to the Washington Post piece. It's that simple. The president is not under investigation.
Well, I wish it were that simple, but with all due respect, the president said, "I am being investigated" in a tweet, and people take his word on that. But you're his attorney. You're saying that the president, when he said that, was not accurate.
No, the president wasn't. It was 141 characters. There's a limitation on Twitter, as we all know. And the president is a very effective utilization of social media. So here's what you have. The president issued that tweet, that social media statement, based on a fake report, a report with no documented sources from the Washington Post. And I want to focus on that for one moment. Isn't it ironic that a leak would take place by 5 anonymous sources saying that the special counsel had increased the scope of their investigation, and they don't even identify the agencies upon which those individuals were speaking? So the president's response, I want to be crystal clear here, the president's response was as it related to the Washington Post report. He cannot, in a Twitter statement, include all of that in there. But the Washington Post statement came out that morning.
So the president
So there should be no confusion. No confusion. The president is not under investigation.
But it is confusing because the president said, "I am being investigated," and you're saying that the Washington Post report is wrong, but no one did more to confirm the Washington Post report than the president. I mean, CNN had not confirmed the Washington Post report, but then President Trump came out and said, quote, "I am being investigated." So the confusion, I mean, is this not frustrating for you as an attorney to have a client that is sharing information with the world that's not accurate?
Look, this is a president that has utilized social media, that has revolutionized the whole concept of electioneering when it comes to the use of social media. He's able to communicate with 107 million people on his various social media platforms on a regular basis as he needs to. So he can directly reach a lot of people. That statement, again, was in response to the Washington Post. So let me be clear. The Washington Post story was based on 5 anonymous sources.
Right.
Doesn't even identify the agency. So that's it. Simple explanation.
Okay. I mean, I don't think it's simple, but I don't think we're getting anywhere, so let me move on. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who was...
I don't think it's simple, but I don't think we're getting anywhere. So that was Jake Tapper's try at getting Jay Sekulow to admit that when Donald Trump wrote, "I am under investigation," it was reasonable for people to interpret that to mean that he was under investigation, although really Trump doesn't know. He just read the Washington Post story. I mean, he could have said if it's that. I made that whole argument not to say that Trump knows he's under investigation, although he probably is, because I think I don't know if there's enough evidence to prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, as Adam Schiff will talk about it in the clip I show at the end. But there's certainly enough evidence to open an investigation into obstruction of justice. Last week I talked about how I think James Comey, in the memos he wrote and handed over to his friend Robert Mueller, I think he kind of wrapped up an obstruction of justice charge, and now Robert Mueller, the special counsel, is investigating that and is basically going to corroborate it by talking to the other people Trump talked to and said, you know, try to get Comey to lay off the Michael Flynn investigation, because that's the other conflation that Jay Sekulow is making in his arguments. That this is in the next clip from CNN's State of the Union. Jake Tapper points out that Trump doesn't have to be under investigation himself to obstruct justice. He could be obstructing justice in the Michael Flynn case, which is probably what he's being investigated for, not for obstructing justice into the investigation of himself, which didn't exist at that time, but obstructing justice by trying to get James Comey to lay off investigation of other people like Michael Flynn, which is what Jake Tapper points out to Jay Sekulow, and he doesn't seem to want to admit, and makes this conflation, which I will discuss a little more after we watch this clip together here.
The president, but I hear what you're saying, but James Comey was fired, according to the president, when he made the decision. He was thinking about the Russia investigation. According to Comey, the president had said to him, I hope you let go this matter relating to Mike Flynn. This is different from the Clinton case without question, but by the same token, the obstruction of justice case is, I'm not saying that it's clear cut, but the obstruction of justice case is, he was trying to stop an investigation, and when he couldn't get what he wanted, he fired the guy heading the investigation.
But to see, again, and we're friends here, that's conflating two different standards under obstruction of justice.
Sure.
So that's not so you cannot use the comparison. The president has the constitutional authority to deal with those that are subordinates within an administration. That is as clear as the Constitution itself. That is a power vested in the President of the United States. That's number one. Number two, there is no ongoing investigation of the president regarding any of this. James Comey has said that. The only basis of the report is what came out of the Washington Post leaked information. And let's talk about activity. The fact of the matter is, you have a former FBI director, and I want to think about this for a moment, who leaks information that he obtained. He had a conversation with the President of the United States, writes it down on a government computer, in his government vehicle, puts it in his government desk, and then when he's terminated, he leaks it to a friend of his to leak it to the New York Times for the sole purpose, he testifies under oath, for the sole purpose of obtaining a special counsel. That's what needs to be investigated here.
I hope there's some pancakes and coffee waiting for you at home. Happy Father's Day again. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, Jake.
Pancakes. That, you know, that's one of the things I think that Jake Tapper didn't do so well. He asked a good question at the beginning about the Michael Flynn investigation, but then he let Jay Sekulow pull that switcheroo where he said, well, of course it couldn't be obstruction of justice because Trump wasn't under investigation for the Russia collusion, or, you know, James Comey told him, and then so he used that as like the switcheroo, and then the distraction of, and what about James Comey? He's such a leaker. He leaked these memos that he shouldn't have leaked, and never really dealt with the idea that Trump might have been obstructing the Michael Flynn investigation. So that was the two clips I want to show of Jay Sekulow on CNN's State of the Union. I have one big long clip of Jay Sekulow on Fox News Sunday, which, like I said, I referred to this earlier as kind of a Jedi mind trick, because in the big clip I'm going to show, first I'm going to show a 20-second clip, but in the clip after that, which is actually like over 7 minutes long, although I may stop it early. I think it may be a little too long. I should have trimmed it a little, possibly. I'll decide while I'm watching it. I will do a fair use legal analysis to make sure that I only use the minimum necessary to support the commentary and criticism that I'm providing you, to make the legal argument there for you. But the point here is that Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, even though at the beginning of the program he actually said that the president confirmed he was under investigation, which a lot of news outlets reported that Donald Trump confirmed he was under investigation because he put out a tweet that started, "I am under investigation," which, you know, that seems to be a good literal interpretation. So Chris Wallace at least did that, but you'll see when he questioned Jay Sekulow, he just asked him if he was under investigation. What does the tweet mean? Can you explain that to me? And then he started asking about Rod Rosenstein, and it was during that Jay Sekulow inadvertently said twice that the president is under investigation, and then he said, "Oh no, I was really talking about a hypothetical constitutional, theory." But first I want to show you this 20-second clip where, just to set it up to show that Chris Wallace is reporting at the beginning of his program that the president has confirmed he's under investigation over here.
Then President Trump confirms he is now under investigation as the special counsel broadens the Russia probe to look into possible obstruction of justice. We'll discuss the potential case against the president and his defense strategy with Jay Sekulow, a member of his legal team. Plus,
so you can see right there from the Fox News introduction that Chris Wallace is reporting in like the first 30 seconds of the show that the president has confirmed he's under investigation, but then he doesn't really press that point with Jay Sekulow when he has him in the interview until Jay Sekulow inadvertently says a couple times, and I think he is trying to make some sort of hypothetical argument, because one thing Chris Wallace does that I think is better than the other questioners you've already watched is he gets Jay Sekulow to admit that he doesn't really know if the president is under investigation because maybe the special counsel isn't telling him. And anyway, I'll discuss this clip more with you after we watch it together here.
President's tweet Friday that I discussed with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar. Here it is again. "I am being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. Witch hunt. Has the special counsel Robert Mueller formally notified the president that he is under investigation?"
The president has not been notified by anyone that he's under investigation. That tweet, Chris, was in response to the Washington Post story that alleged that 5 unnamed sources, anonymous sources, leaked to the Washington Post that the president was, in fact, under investigation. So that tweet was in response to that. There's been no notification of any investigation. Nothing's changed since James Comey said the president was not a target or a subject of investigation. Nothing's changed.
Well, but you don't know that he isn't under investigation now, do you?
Well, no one's notified us that he is, so I can't read people's minds, but I can tell you this. We have not been notified that there's an investigation of the President of the United States. So that nothing has changed in that regard since James Comey's testimony.
I want to go after another part of his tweet. Why is he going after Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein? First of all, he seems to imply that Rosenstein is investigating him. That's not true. It's Mueller. And secondly, he made it clear in an interview with NBC that he decided to fire Comey well before he ever met with Rod Rosenstein. Take a look.
I was going to fire regardless of recommendation.
So there was
He made a recommendation. He's highly respected, very good guy, very smart guy. The Democrats like him, the Republicans like him. He made a recommendation, but regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey.
I want to ask you a direct question. Does the president think that Rod Rosenstein has done anything wrong?
No, the president has never said anything about Rod Rosenstein doing anything wrong. Here's what is the legal situation here. There is a constitutional issue when you have this scenario. The president made a determination based on consultative advice. He decided ultimately, he's the commander-in-chief, he gets to make that decision, that James Comey had to go. That was coming, by the way, from groups right, left, and center over the last year. You and I know that. So there's been concern about James Comey. It was put forward in a memorandum, that's what the president's referencing, from the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General requesting the removal of James Comey as the FBI director. And ultimately, that's the president's determination. So here's the constitutional threshold question, Chris. The president takes action based on numerous events, including recommendations from his Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General's office. He takes the action that they also, by the way, recommended, and now he's being investigated by the Department of Justice because the special counsel, under the special counsel regulations, reports still to the Department of Justice, not an independent counsel. So he's being investigated for taking the action that the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General recommended him to take by the agency who recommended the termination. So that's the constitutional threshold question here. That's why, as I said, no investigation.
What's the question? I mean, you've stated some facts. First of all, you've now said that he is being investigated after saying that you didn't.
No.
You just said,
no, he's
sir,
not being investigated.
you just said that he's being investigated.
No, Chris, I said that let me be crystal clear so you completely understand. We have not received, nor are we aware of any investigation of the President of the United States.
Sir, you just said 2 times that he's being investigated.
No. The context of the tweet, I just gave you the legal theory, Chris, of how the Constitution works. If, in fact, it was correct that the President was being investigated, he would be investigating for taking action that an agency told him to take. So that is protected under the Constitution as his Article I power. That's all I said. So I appreciate you trying to rephrase it, but I'm just being really direct with you here,
Sir, I didn't rephrase it. The tape will speak. Jay, the tape will speak for itself. You said he is being investigated, and it's not just being. Wait a minute, Jay. And it's not Jay. It's not just being investigated for firing Comey. There's also the question of what he said to Comey when Comey was still the FBI director. So there's more than just the fact that he fired Comey.
Chris, let me be clear. You asked me a question about what the President's tweet was regarding the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. That's what you asked me. And I responded to what that legal theory would be. So I do not appreciate you putting words in my mouth when I've been crystal clear that the President is not and has not been under investigation. I don't think I could be any clearer than that.
Well, you don't know that he's not under investigation again, sir. I mean,
I cannot read the mind. You're right, Chris. I can't read the mind of the special prosecutor.
Okay, so we're in agreement. You don't know whether he's under. You don't know whether he's under investigation. You don't know whether he's under investigation or not. Question I'm asking you is, does he think that Rod Rosenstein? It's a very simple question. Does he think that Rod Rosenstein did anything wrong?
The President has not expressed any opinion about Rod Rosenstein.
Does he think that Robert Mueller has done anything wrong?
First of all, he has not said anything about Robert Mueller. And Chris, let me say something here. You're asking me if I had a conversation, which I have not had, about Robert Mueller with the President of the United States, or anyone else for that matter. I can't discuss that and would not discuss that with you. Unlike James Comey, who leaks information to the press, I actually respect the attorney-client privilege. Apparently, he did not.
Does the President believe, well, you're speaking for his legal team, so you're out here to represent him and tell us what the President's belief is that correct?
No, I'm not here to tell you what the facts are and the legal issues are. I'm not to tell you what the beliefs are. I'm not the client's conscience. I'm his lawyer.
I understand that. Have you spoken to the President at all?
Yes, but I'm not going to discuss those conversations with you. Those are privileged under the attorney-client privilege.
Well, I assume that if he asked you to say something, for instance, Mark Kasowitz said all kinds of things about after Comey's testimony. I assume he was speaking for the President.
Mark Kasowitz made a general statement to the press after the testimony of James Comey. That's what that was about. You're asking me now questions about what people are thinking in their minds, which I don't read minds, and you're asking me also what I may or may not have had a conversation with the President about, and you understand this. I respect the attorney-client privilege, unlike James Comey. So I want to be real clear on that, too. I'm not going to give you conversations I've had, have or have not had with the President of the United States. So when I have a conversation with the President of the United States, as his lawyer, it's for privilege, period.
Does the President think that Rosenstein, because you talked about this constitutional theory that he took action on the advice, although he says he didn't take it on the advice of Rosenstein, does he think that Rosenstein should recuse himself, and is he laying the groundwork to fire Rosenstein and Mueller?
I've had no conversations, and I've heard nothing about that at all. Nothing. I think this, Chris, this points out, let me tell you one thing quickly about the constitutional theory, as you called it. It's actually called the Constitution. You know, the President has certain plenary authority.
I think you call it the constitutional theory, sir.
Yeah, it is a constitutional theory based on the Constitution.
I understand that.
Not so-called. It's the constitutional theory. It's part of the Constitution. President has inherent authority. Here's what you're trying to do, Chris, and I appreciate
now you're reading minds again. Now you're reading minds again.
No, Chris. I deal with fact and law.
Well, then don't tell me what I'm trying. Then don't tell me what I'm trying to do, because you don't know what I'm trying to do. Actually, what I'm trying to get is a straight answer out of you. Let me ask you this: as a matter of law,
trying to get a straight answer and did not really succeed there. And I thought that Chris Wallace did a pretty good job there of at the end part of capitalizing on what was a big goof, apparently, by Jay Sekulow, the seasoned Supreme Court litigator who has, who's argued in front of Supreme Court justices and appeared on Fox News many, many times over the years. As I mentioned earlier, I've seen him promoting the right-wing Christian rights group, the ACLJ, that is kind of a doppelganger of the ACLU. And so I've seen him for years, and I don't know why he got in such a fight with Chris Wallace there, but he did make a big mistake by saying the president is under investigation. Even in the context, he was still doing sort of the same thing that the president did, and it's pretty clear that neither the president nor his lawyer really knows for sure whether he's under investigation for obstruction of justice. The Washington Post apparently has 5 anonymous sources who know, but before I finish the Jay Sekulow clips, I want to show kind of the worst questioning of him by John Dickerson on CBS's Face the Nation. He did sort of follow up on the thing that Chris Wallace did, how do you know, and did get Jay Sekulow to admit he didn't really know if the president was under investigation. But he didn't really press him on the whole idea that the president said in his tweet, "I am under investigation." Although at the beginning of the program, and this is another one of the ones, like I said when I showed Meet the Press, that did this comparison of the unity after the shooting in Congress and then the divisiveness of the investigation of the president. This is a 9-second clip from the beginning of Face the Nation where you'll see John Dickerson did the same thing that pretty much all the other news sources did, is they took the president's tweet saying, "I am under investigation," as confirmation that he was under investigation, as you can see in this clip.
Today on Face the Nation, a week of tragedy in Washington and a president under investigation for obstruction of justice. A politically motivated shooting.
So yeah, you can see president under investigation for obstruction of justice, but he doesn't. John Dickerson didn't do that great a job when he was talking to Jay Sekulow about hammering in that point, although he did, I think, do an okay job of pointing out that they don't really know whether he's under investigation or not. And this is the final Jay Sekulow clip before I get to the Adam Schiff Democrat clip that, Representative Adam Schiff is the ranking Democrat on the House. I think he's ranking on the House Intelligence Committee. I know he's on the House Intelligence Committee, and he's been doing a great job sort of making the Democratic argument about what the evidence shows so far, and I'll get to that after we watch John Dickerson do pretty much the lamest job of pinning down Jay Sekulow on the whole president's under investigation issue. More of like a softball question at the beginning here.
I want to start this morning with the president's tweet in which he wrote, "I'm being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. Witch hunt." What's he talking about?
The president issued that tweet on social media because of the report in the Washington Post from 5 anonymous sources, none of which, of course, anyone knows about, alleging that the president was under investigation in this purported expanded probe. The fact of the matter is the president has not been and is not under investigation. So this was his response via Twitter, via social media, was in response to the Washington Post piece with 5 anonymous sources. And by the way, John, 5 anonymous sources, they don't even identify the agencies upon which these individuals purportedly work. So the response there is clear. And I want to be very clear about this. The president is not and has not been under investigation.
How do you know?
Because we've received no notice of investigation. There's been no notification from the special counsel's office that the president is under investigation. In fact, to the contrary. What we know is what James Comey said, the last thing we know, when he testified just a couple weeks back, that the president was not and is not a target of an investigation.
Of course, there have been events since James Comey told him that. Is it your view, and just to educate viewers, that if you were under investigation, there would be an obligation for the special counsel to let you know? Couldn't you be under investigation and they're just not letting you know yet?
Well, look, I can't imagine a scenario where the president would not be aware of it. Number one, there's a serious constitutional issue here. I mean, I want you to think about the context upon which this would take place under the Washington Post's theory of the case. This is the Washington Post theory, that the President of the United States, after being advised by his Attorney General and the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, determined to remove James Comey from the FBI directorship. If the Washington Post leaks were correct, the President of the United States would be, if this was correct, under investigation for taking the action that the Department of Justice asked him to take. That raises not only a serious, it's not a serious constitutional question, it's an easy constitutional question. That's impossible. The President cannot be investigated, or certainly cannot be found liable for engaging in an activity that he clearly has powers to do under the Constitution.
Powers to fire the FBI director. And let me ask you this question more.
James Comey acknowledged that, by the way, John. I mean, James Comey said he served at the pleasure of the president.
More broadly, the big question really is, did the president interfere in any way in the investigation?
So, yeah, John Dickerson did do the follow-up on, you don't really know if you're under investigation, but I don't think he did much more in terms of pointing out the contradictions, and I think I pretty much criticized that clip before I showed it, and sort of to cleanse our palate after all those Jay Sekulow, lawyer for President Donald Trump clips, I wanted to show a Democrat. This is Representative Adam Schiff, who is talking to Martha Raddatz on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Martha Raddatz is a permanent co-host, or I can't remember what her actual title is. And she asks about evidence of collusion, and actually gets more on evidence of obstruction of justice, but then on the follow-up gets the idea, and this is a theory, that there was some coordination between some people on the Trump campaign and the hackers as to when they were going to leak the material they hacked. That's sort of the collusion coordination theory. But you'll also hear the obstruction theory from Adam Schiff. And, nothing conclusive. I believe he says, may not be proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but deserves investigation, which is what I also believe. You can tell me whether you think Robert Mueller, the special counsel, is right now or soon to be investigating personally Donald Trump for obstruction of justice using the poll up here in this corner. And you can think about that while you listen to the evidence as to why there should be at least that much investigation from the Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, in the final clip for tonight here.
You thought there was evidence of collusion. What kind of evidence have you seen? What can you tell us?
Well, I think there is evidence. I can't go into the particulars of our closed investigation, but I also think there's evidence of obstruction. But in both cases, I would say whether there is some evidence doesn't mean that there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The same people that say that there's no evidence of collusion say there's no evidence of obstruction, and the president indeed cannot commit obstruction. I don't buy that. If you look at James Comey's testimony, and we were trying this in the court of law, no judge would exclude that. That would all be relevant evidence as to potential obstruction. And the fact that the president can fire someone for good cause or can fire someone with no cause doesn't mean that he can fire someone for malicious cause. The fact that an employer can terminate an employee at will doesn't mean that he can fire an employee because the employee rejected their sexual advances.
Congressman,
so
I want to go back to the collusion and the evidence. I know you can't talk about specific evidence, but he says Dianne Feinstein has said there's no evidence of collusion. So collusion between whom? Can you tell us that?
Well, the allegation, of course, is that the Russians in the hacking and dumping of documents in the election had essentially relationships with Trump campaign people and coordinated those efforts. Now, the FBI opened an investigation into that issue in July, well before Congress did. I think they did that for good reason in July. I think they maintain that investigation. It's ongoing for good reason as well. But I'm not prepared to say that there's proof you could take to a jury, but I can say that there is enough that we ought to be investigating. Indeed, it would be negligent for us not to investigate. And the principal reason is, Martha, that if a foreign government, in this case Russia, has something that they can hang over the head of our president or our administration that can influence U.S. policy, it is very much in our national security interest to know it. And we need to conduct this investigation now. Newt Gingrich and the president would like us to shut it down before it really is underway. And we are far closer to the beginning of the investigation than we are to the end. But it would be the worst form of negligence to our republic for us to say we're going to close the investigation before we can determine whether there is merit to these allegations.
ABC News has reported that Deputy...
Closer to the beginning than the end, and that definitely seems to be the case with all the evidence that has to be that the Special Counsel Robert Mueller has to wade through, and all the witnesses he has to talk to, and eventually maybe talk to the president if the president is under investigation. I believe, based on the evidence that James Comey wrapped up in a nice little bow and gave to Robert Mueller, as I discussed last week's Sunday live clip roundup, I think he basically gave the special counsel a roadmap with all the elements of obstruction of justice in it, and he now needs to build corroborating case or a corroborating case with other witnesses and other facts and a timeline that matches James Comey's timeline, and I think that's likely to happen, and I think he's either currently under investigation or about to be under investigation, which is what is in the Washington Post story. But you can answer the poll over clicking in this corner and tell me if you think he's now or soon to be under investigation, the President of the United States, for obstruction of justice, or you think no, there's no basis for that investigation. Those are the two possible poll answers, and I'll come back next week and let you know what the results were. Like I said, last week's poll, over 90% of people thought that James Comey was telling the truth versus Donald Trump not telling the truth, when it was sort of a credibility contest between the two of them. Anyway, so that's my broadcast for tonight. I hope you enjoyed the clips I picked out for you on the topic from the Sunday morning news analysis shows, and the Bill Maher clip on the topic of whether Trump is a suspect, whether he's under investigation, and I think he is or is about to be the subject of an investigation by the special counsel on the topic, or on the charge of obstruction of justice for the firing of James Comey to take off pressure on the Russia investigation after asking James Comey for a pledge of loyalty and asking him, or saying he hoped he would lay off the investigation into Michael Flynn, which James Comey testified he felt was a directive that he did not follow, and then he was fired. So that's the factual basis that at least I think should allow us to say there should be an investigation by the special counsel. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section or in the poll, and thanks for all the live viewers who joined me. I noticed I did get one super chat contribution. This is, I think it was Daniil Dmitriev, 400 rubles here. I don't know if you could read that, but it came with a nice comment about finally being able to catch me live and enjoying my work. I think 400 rubles is somewhere close to $7 US. I'm not quite sure about that, but I appreciate the super chat contributions. I appreciate all of my patrons who support me almost $500 a month, which used to be about a third of my income. Now it's about 2/3 of my income, since my YouTube advertising income has dropped so much. So if you want to help support these continuing programs, you can become one of my patrons at a link down in the video description. I can't even tell you what's been going on that's been keeping me busy this last week and possibly this next week, but I may have a chance to make an edited, produced video this week. If not, I will be back next Sunday and every Sunday for the foreseeable future with LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. If you can't support me financially, I know that a lot of people have very strapped budgets, so you can just support me with supportive comments, with a thumbs up, and sharing my video on social media. Any way that you make this seem like a worthwhile endeavor to me, that keeps me going another week or another month, or it's been 4+ years now. So I hope you appreciate the clips I picked out, my commentary and criticism, and until next week, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.